Welcome to our webinar, Keplers and the Future of Independent Bookstores. Booksellers from across the country and even beyond our national borders are here today. We have booksellers from Canada, France, and Italy attending. As I saw each person's name come through to RSVP, I couldn't help but think how each of you are doing in your communities. This is truly a global moment of shared worries, concerns, and as seen by the great response to today's topic on the future of independent bookselling, of intense strategizing on how to best meet tomorrow. I noted the quote by Seneca in the signature line of our Italian guest, Marco of Libreria Atlantide in Bologna, Italy. The quote so speaks to today and the international community of booksellers gathered right now to hear from the Kepler team. The quote is, "We are waves of the same sea, leaves of the same tree, flowers from the same garden." Thank you, Marco, for such a lovely and wise quote. We will now hear from the CEO and management team at Keplers, a world-famous bookstore based in Menlo Park, California. 8 years ago, the Keplers team decided to chart a bold new course and engage their community to transform Keplers into a next generation bookstore. Our presenters today are Praveen Madan, CEO of Keplers, Amanda Hall, General Manager of Keplers Books and Magazines, and Jean Forstner, Co-founder and Executive Director of the nonprofit Keplers Literary Foundation. We encourage you to write questions in the chat and we'll ask them of the presenters. What questions we don't have time for, we'll forward to Keplers, who will answer them in a follow-up recap article in our weekly newsletter. Okay, over to you, Praveen.
Okay, thank you, Linda Marie. Hello, everyone. I'm gonna share my screen here to put up a few PowerPoint slides we have for you today. Let's see. Now, can everyone see the PowerPoint?
Something a little funky happened. Oh, there it is.
There we go.
Okay. Well, great. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for everyone's interest and taking the time to join us today. I want to start off by particularly thanking a couple of people. One is our friend Kelly Justice from Fountain Bookstore, and she was the one who made a provocative Facebook post, I think it was almost a couple of months ago, asking if other bookstores had ideas or suggestions on how we can pay our staff better wages. And that created a flurry of responses and interest, and people started to weigh in. And in a way, that was kind of the starting point of us coming together. And then I want to also thank Linda Marie, because I think she saw some of that activity and said, hey, there's something here, and we should organize a group to come together and talk about it. So thank you, for making this happen. I also want to recognize that in the 12 years, almost 13 years I've been in bookselling, I and our team have just gained so much by talking with other booksellers and bookstore owners and managers around the country and around the world. It's just such a remarkably caring and giving and sharing community, virtually unheard of in any other industry. And so with everything we've learned and everything we've been able to gain, we're happy to pay it forward and share some of our experiences and learnings. And I hope this is going to be useful and helpful for everyone. So what we have here are about 20 PowerPoint slides here, and I'm going to try to run through them pretty fast in 30-35 minutes. About half, the first half of the slides I'll be sharing, or we'll be sharing. Jean and Amanda are going to join me in some of that. Are really about the Kepler's experience, and our intent is just to be completely transparent, very open in sharing our journey, what we did, why we did it, how we did it, so you can just see it for what it's worth. And then the second part of the presentation, we'll talk about the industry, we'll talk about other bookstores, we'll talk about how some of this might or might not apply to you, hope to leave you with some takeaways. And then Linda Marie is going to facilitate question and answer for the last part, for about 20 or 25 minutes. So that's how we're going to go. On my opening slide here, I have a subtle provocation that I'm not going to address right now, but you're welcome to ask me a question about it, which is, I think we need to consider rebranding independent bookstores to community bookstores. And as you go through the presentation, you'll hopefully see why I feel that way, and happy to talk about that further. Okay, so why is my I'll flip slides. Okay, here we go. So as I was starting to get ready for this discussion, this presentation, I read a really interesting essay by Arundhati Roy, who's a Man Booker Prize winner and best-selling author. And I thought that a part of what she said towards the end of that essay, which was just recently published, was just so relevant and pertinent to this moment in time we find ourselves in. Many of our stores are closed, our events have been canceled. We're sitting in this crisis with hundreds of bookstores running GoFundMe campaigns. And I'll just give you a moment to read Arundhati's quote here, where she's talking about a crisis like this caused by a pandemic as a portal, a gateway from one world to the next, and we have choices in terms of how we walk through it. And she's suggesting that that we obviously consider walking through it lightly with little luggage, little baggage, and emerge from it ready to imagine another world. And in a way, that's what we did when we had a big Kepler's crisis 8 years ago. We'll talk about that, and we are trying to do the same thing again now with this crisis that all of us are facing. So I thought that was a good place to start. Jean, you want to talk about just introducing Keplers?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So welcome everybody. I thought it would be, just wanted to take a minute to sort of give people context about those of you who haven't been able to visit the store or know our area, to kind of understand where we are and our place in California. So Menlo Park, which I know is not on everyone's list of destination places they want to go, but we're about 25 miles south of San Francisco, kind of equidistant between San Jose and San Francisco. And we're really close to Stanford University, which is just up the street. I actually went to Stanford, and one of the first things I heard about when I arrived on campus was, well, the campus bookstore is fine, but if you really want to go to a great bookstore, you need to go to Keplers. And Keplers was founded in 1955 by Roy Kepler, and he was a really interesting person. He was a peace activist, and he was looking for a way to support his family and also give something back to the community. And so he sort of rode that initial wave of the paperback revolution, where the idea was paperbacks were cheap, everyone could get access to that great intellectual content. And so that was sort of his vision and what he started. He maintained his activism through the entire time he was working at Keplers. There have been a couple of different books, and well, one book and one documentary film about Roy and about Keplers. The book is Radical Chapters, and Roy is in one of those people sitting. I think that was an anti-war protest that he participated in. During that era, Keplers was really incredibly well known, along with Cody's in Berkeley. Several members of the Grateful Dead worked at Keplers when they were in high school. We're told that they didn't actually work all that hard and played a lot of music, but anyway, that was their intro. Joan Baez also worked there. She sang her first public concert was at Keplers. And of course, there's the connection to Stanford, which is walking distance of the store. And over time, our area has changed. I mean, that was a time when it was different than now. And Silicon Valley really grew up around us. And so we're now in the neighborhood with Facebook. Google's up the road. So as Silicon Valley grew, so did our connection to the tech community and to all the people that have moved into the area and that are part of that. So our sort of focus has changed a bit along the way. The bookstores won a number of awards, a Pinnell Award for the children's programming and a number of others. And now we really view ourselves as still very entrenched in the community. We hosted a 60th anniversary party 5 years ago, and we had the idea to have everyone have a name tag that said, I've been shopping at Keplers since whatever year, and people would put in their decade, and they all found each other and had a great sense of, I was here in the 50s and the 60s, 70s, that type of thing. So that is our connection to our community.
Great, thank you, Jean. So I, personally got involved with Keplers in late 2011. Before that, I'd known Keplers as a customer when I was living and working in Silicon Valley and lived in this community. And then later when I got into bookselling, I got to know Keplers as, just a fellow bookstore. But in late 2011, this was our starting point. Keplers was facing a big crisis and was a few weeks away from starting a liquidation sale. And for some of you who are old timers, you might remember that this was actually Kepler's second big crisis. Keplers had faced and actually shut down once before in 2005, and had essentially been revitalized by its community with new money and new input, new ideas, a new board. And 6 years later, here are things again for a second time. Sometimes we talk about wow, Kepler is a store that's failed very publicly twice. And we certainly don't want to see a third time, that happening, and that's, been one of our motivators. So I don't need to go through, point by point about, just how dismal the situation looked. But essentially, we use the crisis, as someone has said, don't let a serious crisis go to waste. And I think that's, exactly what, we were able to do. Now, here is a mental model I carry with me from my days growing up in India. So I was born and brought up in New Delhi, and back in the 70s when I was growing up there, our main means of public transportation was to take these public buses, which were just like poorly manufactured, poorly maintained, would break down all the time, and something was it's like very much in the habit and the culture there, which is when a bus would break down or stop, all the driver would have to do is just turn around and signal to people, passengers, and everyone will get outside and start pushing the bus. And it was such a known thing that really the driver didn't even have to open his mouth. They didn't have to even say a word. And people just knew, oh, the bus is stalled and we're blocking traffic and there's a problem. Okay, we got to get out and push. And that's what we have to do. And this just used to happen all the time. And essentially, I think that's the mental model we used with Keplers, that it was a bus, it was broken, and we had to figure out how to get people to push, and who were the people. So in early 2012, we formed a transition committee formed of community champions, selected from the community and selected from the staff, and we launched a program called Keplers 2020, and our goal was to really just transform Keplers because of these two crises that had suffered through into something that was going to be far more sustainable, and that could pay living wages to its staff, that could start Amazon proofing its business model. And we really involved early on what we call the whole system. This is a term I'm borrowing from our coach Sandra Gianoff. I think I actually saw Sandra. She's on the call. Who runs an organization called the Future Search Network. So we really involved the whole system, and what we mean by the whole system is it was everyone who had a stake in Kepler's success. That included our staff, our landlord, authors, media, fellow bookstores, our donors, our customers, and we involved them, in the early days, one by one, one-on-one with just meetings and interviews. And then finally, we actually conducted a 2.5 day long future search to have everyone come together and talk about where Keplers had been, where it could go, what the possibilities were. and really come up with a joint, vision, for the future. The other thing I want to mention here is there are many times in this journey where I've felt very alone and very overwhelmed, and really just not finding the help I thought I needed coming from places I thought the help should be coming from, like the publishers, or some of the trade associations. And I think the big lesson I personally learned during these moments is that there is always abundance of help around, that I just have to open my eyes and look in the right places and ask the right people. And the people I've generally turned to are our staff, and our community of customers, and they've just been so remarkably giving with their time, their money, their ideas, their energy, and that's a lesson that we are reminded of again and again. So that's where we started. 8 years later, I'll ask Amanda to talk about where we are today.
Thanks, Praveen. Hi, everybody. I think the biggest takeaway for me for this journey that we've been on is that we did this hard reboot in 2012. And what that meant for me is that we really changed the way we do business. We question literally every assumption of running a bookstore and ask the questions, how is it going to impact our staff, and how is it going to impact our community? And I think that that's made a really big difference. On this slide, you can go through some of the items. The two that really resonate with me and that I'm most proud of are that we have raised staff compensation by 75%. And this includes raising that minimum starting wage to $15 an hour. And we did that several years ago. Every activity that we do in the store is focused on being able to keep increasing staff wages to something that resembles a living wage. Even recognizing that here in the Bay Area, that's particularly challenging. We've also been able to redistribute any type of profit that we have had back into profit sharing with the staff. And that is shared very democratically. It's based on number of hours worked. We divide it all up and everybody gets their share, management included. So that's been really rewarding. And the second thing is really kind of moving our event program away from events in a bookstore and sell some books to making sure that we're providing access to the entire community for these types of events. We have started a program with our Title I schools where we're bringing authors into those schools. Traditionally, that wouldn't happen because the market there for buying books would be gone. And the foundation works with donors and publishers and authors to have donated books go into the schools, have the students engage with the authors in super unique and purposeful programming. And that's been one of the highlights for me for our change in direction for events. And I think the last thing I would just add is that we continue to focus on innovation and change. Back to you, Praveen.
Thank you, Amanda. So the next, two slides I'm going to talk about, and that's, really would mostly conclude the, Kepler's, part of the journey, are about what we did and how we actually accomplished these changes. And, I really have to say that there are no quick fixes here in our experience. What worked for us is a systematic, long-term, disciplined rethinking of the entire business from inside out and outside in. As Amanda was saying, we question every assumption, we do it all the time. And it's now just become, part of the DNA and the culture of the organization. So let me run through, some of the things we've done here. And there's going to be a lot here on these next two slides. And again, our goal here is just to be fully open and transparent in terms of what we have done and what's worked for us. We're not necessarily suggesting that that all of you in your bookstores and different communities need to do all these things, or even all of these things are necessarily suitable for you. So we'll address that in the second part of the presentation. So,
Praveen?
Yep.
I was just letting you know that we hit the 15-minute point.
Excellent. Thank you, Linda Marie. So on this slide, we're talking about the blueprint of, Kepler's transformation, and it's really changing three core things, which you'll see on the left hand of the slide. I think we've changed our purpose, which is our reason of existence. I think we've changed what we are providing, and we've changed how we organize to do our work. And these are very fundamental changes. I think we've changed our purpose. We've really, every day come to think that we are here for a mission. Our mission is to engage, enrich, and inspire our community through literature. We change what we provide. I think our team really understands that we are in the business of providing strong relationships, literary services, and literary experiences, and we try to monetize them, very, aggressively, for the benefit of, all of our staff. And then we change how we organize, to do our work. I think we really try to create a very democratic, very open, very rather flat organization with a mix of for-profit and non-profit models, where because we just think that's create a healthier work environment without any classes, where people really feel like that the business is being run for their benefit and not just for an owner's benefit. So I think these are some fundamental changes we've been able to make. And then the last, like slide talking about the Kepler's, journey in the past. I think four major ingredients of what has worked for us and what has, helped us get the kind of results we've been able to get are changing our mindset, bringing in new skills, bringing in new money, and introducing and starting to use new structures. And there's a lot on the slide that, I'm not going to be able to talk through everything, but let me just, pick a few examples. So let's start, with the top right and talk about, the mindset. We obviously had, new leadership at, Keplers, starting from 2012, forward, that, allowed us to, really, kind of like shed some of the baggage in terms of ideas and practices, of the past, and be able to look at things, from a fresh, standpoint. I think the philosophy of stewardship, and I have a book to recommend on this topic for all of you later, has really been key and continues to be key for us. And we define stewardship, like Peter Block, whose book I'm going to recommend does, which is it's just a deep sense of responsibility that we are here to serve this institution we are working in, and we are here to serve all the stakeholders and help all the stakeholders. But we're not here to own it. We're not here to maximize, profit from it. We're not here, for any self-interest. And we're really here to just do right by, every stakeholder and leave the institution in better hands, when, we move on to, other things. So I think that's just been, really core. There are a lot of new skills, we've had to learn, and we are still, learning. Fundraising is huge. And just so important to building this kind of institution. Focus on metrics. I mean, I come from an engineering background. A lot of math and things. I'm just pretty brutal about creating metrics, measuring things, and really being able to see the actual results and hard numbers. And then, I want to talk, a little bit about new structures. I talked about, the future search, we conducted, we set up a hybrid legal structure with a for-profit and a non-profit working together. So there's a lot of, new structures that, that have really helped us and, worked for us. So I think this is, kind of how, we accomplished, what we did. So let's, switch gears and, talk a little bit about the industry. And I think a great place to start is this constant feed of news media that we've been hearing for the last many years about the resurgence and the thriving that bookstores were experiencing. And to me, the really the kind of like one of the highlights of that was a professor from Harvard Business School issuing his study about how independent bookstores were like Swiss watchmakers, and how we are all thriving. And I have to be honest here. This stuff just makes me mad, and I don't even know where to start. I'm sure the professor who did the study had good and noble intentions, but I think you really missed a pretty big and significant elephant in the room. And here's the elephant he missed. Because if you look at the data, it really tells a very different story. This data is from the Abacus, most recent Abacus survey that American Booksellers Association helps to oversee, where about 300 bookstores all over the U.S. report the financials on a confidential basis, and then the results are summarized and shared back with everyone. So if you look at it, the average bookstore is making a profit of 1.3% on sales, which is really nothing. And the average annual salaries are, just like, barely, above poverty level, even if you can, call it that. And then, I have a quote here from, a small bookstore owner at the bottom, on a Facebook post, talking in the reaction to media stories about, thriving. So I know there's been a lot of, actual complaints and griping about people not really believing this narrative of bookstores thriving, and then we've also seen that that leading bookstore owners have occasionally also admitted the harsh reality of the economics of our industry, sometimes in private and sometimes publicly. So here is Allison Reed, who's the co-owner of Diesel Bookstore in California, talking about an unsustainable business model and how our premise is built on paying low wages and benefits to staff. And then we have Bradley Graham, who's actually on the ABA board and is the vice president of the board, talking about how the cushion is going to run out well before they can pay $15 an hour, and the industry is not on firm financial footing. So if you pay attention, there were kind of like mixed messages about the whole narrative about thriving. And we really question how an industry can be called to be thriving when people who are working in the industry are making so little money. And the current crisis has just proved the point, one more time, with hundreds of bookstores finding that they had virtually no working capital reserves, no balance sheet strength, and had to immediately turn to GoFundMe campaigns. So I think this again, is just proving to us one more time the necessity to build new models. I really think the industry needs to, and bookstores need to start thinking about, what do new sustainable models look like? Because in our view, and this is our humble opinion, that the old model is basically not sustainable and not workable. So how do we build sustainable new models? Well, I think at a high level, it's actually at a level of philosophy, it's very simple. Amazon has a business philosophy which is very transactional. It's based on better and better algorithms. They have a very closed and secretive system and a ruthlessly competitive model. And I think the business philosophy we have been following, and we think this at a philosophy level, this should work for everyone in the bookstore world. I think we need to build our business philosophy needs to be built on strong relationships with our stakeholders. We believe that people, high human touch working with algorithms will always beat algorithms, will be better. We think we need to build open and transparent systems. And then finally, we think we need to build mission-oriented, sustainable models. This is how it translates into, where we are going. So this is our vision for Keplers as well as for others who choose to follow paths similar to Keplers. And the vision, is, basically anchored on a model that is increasingly more and more about services and experiences. Service and experiences for readers. How do we help people become better, stronger, deeper readers? How do we create the next generation of readers? I mean, nearly 50% of American adults don't read a single book after high school. This is one of my favorite quotes of all time. I use it all the time, when I'm talking to people. And we would just like to double down developing new readers. And we think the right model to do that is really a nonprofit model. because that's not a profitable activity. That's a social mission-based activity. We'd like to have a lot of services and experiences for writers. We do a lot of literary events, both traditional ones and new ones. So I think the importance and the footprint for retail would shrink in relative proportion as we build more and more new services and experiences. And then we think the whole thing needs to be surrounded by a very strong membership program where people buy into the idea of lifetime dues or annual dues, from a sense of, this is something that gives them belonging, it gives them community, it gives them identity, and generates, essentially a new revenue stream, for the bookstore. And here are,
Praveen,
yeah.
we're at the 5-minute warning.
Perfect, thank you. I set Linda Murray to give me those reminders. Thank you.
Doing it.
So here are kind of guiding principles for how to continue this journey, and we think some of these, and hopefully most of these, can be useful and helpful to all of you in your communities and your bookstores. We think it makes a lot of sense to have a twin mission: an external mission, which is around the community, and an internal mission, which is really about meaningful work for meaningful pay for our staff. We really want to see our staff see this as a profession, have opportunities to grow, and really, treat them as a very, very important partner and stakeholder in this journey. We think the future of bookstores is to be community-owned and community-governed, which means they have to be financed by the community. They have to have a lot of impact on the community. There has to be structured involvement with the community through boards and with the donors and volunteers. We raised close to $2 million over the last 8 years, from our community, and that money has helped us build a strong, sustainable institution. Now, of course, we are facing a crisis right now, just like everybody else is, so we have a lot of work ahead of us also. But I think we have changed the fabric and the core relationship and how the community views this. I think third, a substantial part of the revenue has to come from sources other than book sales, and there's some examples that we've given here, and which we are getting revenue from all the sources today. I think all services and experiences have to be monetized for those who can afford them, and then subsidized or pro bono for those who cannot. And then the last point is really about the values that that can help us. So why is now a great time to start? I mean, again, an interesting quote here from Richard Bach. We really think it's the old reselling, retail heavy, retail centric model of bookselling is coming to an end. And we have an opportunity to reinvent, rethink, and build a better model, which will still include retail and physical bookstores, but it becomes something else, like kind of like a butterfly. And we think now is a good time because of these 4 reasons. I think for a long time, customers have starting to accept bookstores as a necessary social service. And that's a long-term trend, and it's just spiked now with the success that a lot of GoFundMe campaigns are having. I think customers are willing to pay for experiences, services, memberships. We've seen a lot of data for this. I think customers want something new. They want to be engaged. They want to be enriched. They want to be inspired. They want to have relationships with institutions they can trust. And then finally, I think there's just an abundance of smart, passionate, literary people who are willing to get to work. So this is where I'm going to leave you with. This is I certainly don't feel the expert talking about this page, but it's something we have used. It comes from Dr. Claes Jensen's work, who was a Swedish professor in the 70s, and he created this 4 rooms of change theory. And there's a couple of ways you can use this framework. I think you can use it to ask yourself, which one of these 4 rooms are you in? Are you in denial? Are you confused? Are you content? Or are you ready to renew? Certainly you want to get out of denial. We end up there occasionally, and then we have to find a way out of it because there's, it happens to all of us. I think it's okay to be confused. I think confusion is, our friend. I think it's good to recognize when we're confused about some choices and some decisions we have to make, and be able to, find our way, out of that room. I think it's good and healthy to be contented some of the time, but really where we like to live most of the time, as much as possible, is in the top right, in the renewal room, because I think that's the room that allows us to do the kind of changes we've been able to do. I think another way to use it, apart from just kind of like a self assessment, is to use it as a tool to assess others. I mean, if you're talking to a publisher and you're asking them to do something different or new, you can use this to assess where is the publisher. Are they seeing the reality of bookstores? Are they willing to join you in the renewal room, or are they really just stuck in denial? And frankly, most of the big ones are stuck in denial or contentment. Regarding the reality of bookstores, because it's working fine for them. They're big corporations that make decent money, and they're doing okay. So I think it can also be used, just as a way to assess how are you going to build your team, because you're going to need a team if you're going to start on a journey like this. You're going to need a team, and your team is going to have to join you in renewal, for your business. And then last, I want to leave you with some reading recommendations. The book on stewardship we talked about. There's another great book about owning our future by Marjorie Kelly, and the book about future search from Sandra Janoff and Marvin. All the self-disclosure. All of these three books are published by Barrett Kohler, where I served on the board for a long time. It has been a very influential experience for me. Because it's just a remarkable, publishing company, and we've been able to use a lot of their ideas and practices. And there's also a couple of articles, on this page if you want to learn more. So I'm going to pause here and let Linda Marie switch to some questions.
Okay, and we have a lot of them.
Okay.
Can you talk about how Keplers is structured from a legal perspective, S corp, nonprofit, et cetera?
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. So we restructured Keplers under a hybrid legal model, which has two legal entities. So the core retail bookstore is part of a for-profit entity, and we set it up as what's known as a special purpose corporation. So it's not a tax deductible thing, but it does allow us to disclose and state in our articles and bylaws that this organization is being run for a social purpose, and here's what our social purpose is. So it's kind of like a C corp, but it's different because of the inclusion of the social purpose. And then we really spun off a lot of Kepler's community work in the schools, our entire events program, into a separate nonprofit, which is now called Kepler's Literary Foundation. In early days, we were using a different name, but then 3 years in, we rebranded it. And we actually have two different websites, keplers.com and keplers.org. And these two organizations work and collaborate very closely with each other on a common mission. And there's a resource sharing agreement in terms of what resources we share and how. So this is really like a state-of-the-art legal model we've been able to design with a lot of pro bono help from Morrison, Forster, a big law firm. So that's how it's structured.
What are the metrics you use to judge staff performance?
Good question. Amanda, Jean, which one of you wants to talk about that?
I can take that. I would actually say that we don't necessarily use metrics to judge staff performance. We've recently switched to kind of a goal-based system where staff are engaged in coming up with goals that they want to accomplish, and then we put those together and then reevaluate where we are. So they're striving for something that we're in alignment with, and then move on to the next thing. Jean, you're on mute.
Events program, we don't really use a metric for staff performance, but we really do use a lot of metrics to look at our program performance. So we're looking at how many people we engage, what is the depth of our program, the breadth, age group served, revenue, all of that. So it's really, the metric is really more attached to the program.
Yeah, the one thing I want to add to that is I think we really try to go away from the idea of annual performance evaluations because I just don't think they work or they're very effective. So I think that culturally the kind of system we're trying to build, and this is still very much work in progress, is a system of ongoing coaching, ongoing support, ongoing feedback, and really just empowering staff so they come to work, they have a clear sense of the goals, they have a clear idea of what they're there to do, and they just basically get to it. And generally, in my experience, is that people don't want to be micromanaged. I hate to be micromanaged. I don't think anyone enjoys being micromanaged. So we really, even with the hourly staff, we try very, very hard to build that kind of empowering system.
Is there any training or consulting available for bookstores wanting to make the shift?
That's a good question. Certainly not from us. We're happy to talk to people, one-on-one, or have a conference call like this one to continue sharing what we've done. A lot of people have we've been doing this for years. Anytime anyone from any community, any bookstore reaches out to us and says, "Hey, we heard you guys are doing something new and interesting. Can you tell us more about it?" We always try to be very open, very sharing with everyone. So happy to keep sharing, keep helping in any way we can. And I think the other way I would answer the question is, I really sincerely believe there is abundance of help available, and it's available in your communities. You have customers, you have people walking into your stores, you have authors who have the skills, the time, the energy, the ideas to help you. And I think it's okay to ask for help. I think one of the first things we have to learn to do is how to ask for help and say, we need help. And I think in my first 6 months of my Kepler's journey in 2012, that's all I did. I just went around and spoke to anyone who was willing to talk. And I would always end the conversation by saying, okay, you like this idea. How do you want to help? Do you want to help with time? Do you want to help with money? Do you want to help with ideas? And people generally self-select.
Could you share the size of your staff for both the for-profit and nonprofit entities and how you've been able to raise the hourly rate and salaries?
So let's address a two-part question. So, we have about, give or take 25 people working between the two organizations, a mix of, full-time and part-time people, roughly about, 20 of them on the bookstore side and about 5 or so on the nonprofit, programs, side of the organization. In terms of how we've been able to, raise the, the salaries and the, the wages for the staff. I think spinning out the nonprofit events program was a huge part of it, because we really just don't believe, again, the narrative that events are a profit-making activity. Some of the best event organizations in the country are run as nonprofits. In San Francisco Bay Area, that's City Arts and Lectures and the Commonwealth Club and the Jewish Community Centers. In New York, it's the 92nd Street Y. So there's a reason these organizations are, which are producing, arts and culture programming very similar to what bookstores do. They have chosen to organize as nonprofits because essentially it allows them to bring in more money as donations and grants, which are really revenue streams. So I think that's like a big part of what we've been able to do. Because years ago, we looked at that and we were like, wait, something's wrong with this picture. In the entire world, for-profit companies are supposed to have more money and more resources, and non-profits are kind of like seen as, the ones who are struggling and having to go around, with the hat, raising money. In the arts and literature world, it's upside down. These arts and culture nonprofit organizations have bigger budgets, better facilities, their staffs are better paid, they can afford more into the marketing resources. And here we are, bookstores trying to rely on book sales as a way to fund this arts and culture programming. I mean, it's just insanity. It doesn't make any sense to us at all. So we like, we want to be in that business, like those guys. So let's figure out how to do that. And and that's so that's been a big part of it, but not the only part. I think we also, as Amanda and Jean mentioned earlier, we are just very rigorous about tracking the metrics on every program, every activity, everything we do. We become very good at saying no, still not good enough. So when people approach us for instance, offsites, oh, I'm gonna have an author at my house, and I'm gonna have like 20 people. Why don't you come send somebody to sell books, and it'll be great for you? We're like, no, thank you. It doesn't make any sense. It's not gonna cover even our staff time. So I think it's just a systematic business thinking of trying to improve the financials of the business for the betterment of the staff. I think that's been a big part of it also. Amanda, Jean, do you want to add anything to that about salaries and wages?
I would like to add that I think we engage the community as well. Since it's a huge focus for us, we don't do a lot of things. We don't sell books on sale. We don't do offsites. We charge ticketing revenue. And all of the conversations that we have about those decisions that we've made involve keeping a living wage, raising wages. And so customers know when they come into our store, we're not matching Amazon prices. Why? Well, I'm trying to pay a living wage to our team. We rely on your support in order to do that.
Yeah, we really dislike discounts. It's like, I just have a negative reaction to anyone wanting discounts. Don't like giving discounts at all.
I have a question along those lines. What advice would you give to a bookstore whose customers are very focused on price and do not have a community focus? Do you shower them with small business messaging? At what point do you give up when your community does not show up to author events and art events? Do you create, or do you go and find community?
Oh, that's a hard one. I'll have to think about that one. Because that just seems so different than our experience.
I could add in though, we do have customers who aren't willing to pay full price for things. And we do have customers who don't want to attend an event that's ticketed. But I think when you're looking at making sure we're sustainable for the community, having a smaller event with people who've paid tickets is that model. Having an event that nobody pays for, that may or may not show up, isn't. And so I think that we know that we can't cater to everybody, but those who want this experience or want this bookstore are kind of encouraged to understand change in their practice.
Yeah, the one thing I would add is I would ask you to validate your assumption. I can certainly understand and relate if you're seeing customers who don't want to pay, or for events, or don't want to come to events, or want to just free events, and don't want to buy books, or you're not seeing enough of the community feel. But I think the way you could validate that is you could do a survey and ask some good questions about what do people value, and what would they value less. I think it's an opportunity for some deeper listening and some honest conversation with your community. I think also just opening the kimono in terms of being able to share the reality of your business, and that it just doesn't work as a purely for-profit business where you're expected to match Amazon's prices. I think customers have to see and understand the reality before they start changing their minds. It's for us this wasn't easy, or it's taken us years and years of literally thousands and thousands of conversations and letters and meetings with customers to really retrain our customers into what are they walking into when they come to Keplers, and how do we want them to engage with it. Because a lot of customers have that idea, oh, this is just like a for-profit thing, and the owner must be making really good money. So I think some good self-disclosure, some good conversations, some deep listening, and maybe that will show the path forward. I certainly don't have any better answer than that.
A couple people have asked about how you see this working in more of a rural or suburban setting without the population density of your area. Can you envision that?
Yeah, so Linda Marie did give us a heads up that that we're going to have a lot of diverse population of stores joining us today, and we've been talking about that just in the recent days about how this applies to rural stores, to smaller stores, and which are have different communities and different characteristics like ours. So I think I would go back to the slide where I was showing the 5 principles moving forward. I think you have to do the work to figure out which one of those principles will really work for you. It doesn't have to be all 5. Can you move to a mission-based model? Can you start monetizing things you're not monetizing today? Can you move to some kind of community financing? Can you introduce something as simple as a membership program where people are paying $20 a year to be part of your community, and then you give them some discounts or some benefits, and create a profitable revenue stream out of that. So I think at an idea level, there's certainly ideas here that can work in rural settings and in smaller stores. But I think the place to start is you have to build your team, and if you're a small store, your team might start with might be you and your partner. Which could be your spouse or somebody else you're in business with, or your 2 employees. If you're like a 1-person shop, you still have people in the community. You have to start somewhere with you are surrounding yourself with people who are willing to help you, who are willing to work with you. Because go back to the bus. You're the driver of the bus. You're going to need help, and your job is to figure out who can help you push the bus. So I think that's where you need to start.
If I could add language to that, we refer to those people as our community champions. They're the people that really love what we do. They're engaged in what we do. And you need to find the champions in your community that want to be your partner in this. And we've found over and over again that we just keep building that bench of people who want to be with us on this journey. And that's made a huge difference.
Yeah, and there are new people showing up all the time. So like 3 weeks ago, I heard from like a Facebook employee who had just bought a book from us, and he wrote back to our orders team saying, "I work at Facebook. I would like to talk to somebody about doing some Facebook ads for you." So they forwarded the email to me. We reached out to him. I talked to him, it's I'm personally always looking for opportunities where somebody from the community shows an interest in getting involved, because then I make it my job, my mandate to figure out how best to plug them in a way where they can be pushing the bus. And now this guy from Facebook, who I didn't even know 3 weeks ago, is doing literally $9,000 worth of free Facebook ads for us. And it's not just the money of ads that he's doing. He's also bringing a level of expertise in doing Facebook ads that, is, we don't have on our team. We have a lot of Facebook ad expertise, but he is just like a whole other level. Because in his day job, he's working for big corporations, helping them figure out how to spend, hundreds of millions of dollars on Facebook. So suddenly we have, the super duper, person from the, community who just, started with, one, little interest. And now, he's helping us, generate more web sales with, all the ads he's doing.
What is your biggest challenge under your business model?
Complexity. So you have 2 people resonating with that on my team. I think when we started, we really had a good and noble intention that we are trying to create a model that would not just work for Keplers, but would also work for other bookstores. When we did our future search, back in 2012, we invited, I think 6 or 7 other, bookstore owners and managers to join us, with that. But I have to be honest that after years of evangelizing this nonprofit hybrid model, sharing it with people, talking to people about it, there's kind of like, actually good news and bad news. The good news is that about a dozen bookstores now around the country have started nonprofits in different forms and fashion. So I think that's great and encouraging news. The part that's I'm not that wild about anymore is the opportunity for people to use this nonprofit hybrid model to really be able to improve wages, fundamentally restructure the financial statements. That's a lot of work, and it creates a lot of operational and financial complexity. I'm very fortunate that I have Amanda and Jean who've been able to help manage that kind of complexity. But I really learned that it's probably not for everyone. I think that's the biggest challenge. Jean, Amanda, you want to add anything to that? Or do you agree that that's the biggest challenge, the complexity of the beast we've created?
I would agree that it's the complexity, but also just it's hard work to run a small business, and it's hard work to question everything. It's hard to say no to a lot of things. But I think having the mission makes it worth fighting for. So that's been a help.
We don't have much time, but a clarification on your business model. Are you a B Corp?
No, we're not a B Corp. As I mentioned earlier, we used a legal form of organizing the company that's available in California. It's available in some of the states, but not all states. And it's called a special purpose corporation. But it's actually very similar to a B Corp.
Okay. Do you have separate staffs working at the for-profit and nonprofit sides?
Yes. Jean, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we do. We have a small team that works on the nonprofit side that produces all of the programming in the community. We produce school programming. We run the Title I program. We produce writing classes and literary seminars, that type of thing. We think that the advantage of having that is that people can really be specialized, and they learn the work, they know how to do it, and they're really able to focus. But our teams collaborate all day, every day. And so that, we do a lot of our events at the bookstore. We work with the ordering teams, so there's a ton of collaboration between the two teams, but people do get a chance to specialize a little bit. But Amanda can also talk about there are community engagement efforts that the bookstore team leads that aren't really programs that we do, but things that are where we kind of share overlap in a mission there. So if you want to talk about that, Amanda.
Sure. I mean, all of our bookstore staff are multitaskers, and then we do have some specialists. And some of the engagement that we do, for example, with the community would be through our kids team, working with librarians and teachers and library building for those Title I schools.
Well, we've come to the end of our time here. Thank you all so much for being here today. Thank you, Praveen, Amanda, and Jean for presenting. And we've recorded the presentation and we've copied all the questions. So if we didn't get to your question, we're going to send them on to Keplers, and they'll give us answers that we will present in a recap article in our newsletter. So I hope today's presentation sparks great things. Thank you.